Hello Light Assault or aspiring Light Assault players. Today we'll be covering some basics for taking care of enemy aircraft. One of the largest problems a ground force may face when attempting to take a base, or more frequently defending one, is the risk of enemy air superiority. A couple Liberators having a controlling presence in the air can very often lock down your team's ability to act on the ground effectively, and could lock down your spawn point. Air-to-ground bombardment can destroy your tank or Sunderer, and even steal your cookies. And you're not always going to have air support of your own to help you. And even if you do have a few air-to-air fighters, if they're outnumbered, they probably won't last long enough to clear the skies for you. So what can you do? Well, you might be able to take some of the pressure off of your team. First, what do you need to be effective? At least one C4 brick, as many jump jet upgrades as you can afford, and a second C4 brick when you can spare the certs. Now you may be thinking, but Balthazar, why jump jets before a second C4 brick? Well, long ago in the misty pasts of December and January, it took 2 C4 to kill an enemy fighter, or 1 in a magazine from a carbine. At the time, 2 C4 would also not kill a Liberator, though it could reduce one to a burning state. But in more recent days, C4 has been buffed, and it now only takes 1 C4 brick to kill an enemy fighter, and also a Liberator bomber, depending on where it's placed. Since it's more important to be able to get to the Liberator in the first place than to have a second C4 brick, this increases their importance. Now, there is no level of jump jet that is good enough. Enemy bombers and fighters need to be reasonably close to the ground to be able to bombard ground targets with a good deal of accuracy, but there is no specific altitude that pilots generally hover at, and oftentimes they will be out of range. The more powerful your jump jet is, the more likely you are to reach your target, so take as many upgrades as you can afford. High-altitude enemy bombers that are hundreds of feet in the air need to be attacked from above, mainly by bailing out of a fighter over them and landing on top of them. When attacking from the ground, you just fly up from the ground or off of a building and try to get on top of the enemy aircraft. If there is a bomber at low altitude, but you feel you can't quite make the jump to get up to it, use the terrain to your advantage. Consider, is there a building nearby to give you a boost? A cliff, perhaps? Oftentimes, terrain can help you close the gap. Nowadays, I'd recommend the normal default jump jet, since you can't jump off the ground and fly up to enemy aircraft with the drifters. The drifters can still be good when you're bailing out of a fighter and above an enemy aircraft, but the normal jump jets aren't terrible for that either, if you align where you're bailing out correctly. If the Icarus jump jets are ever put back in the game, I will likely switch to using them instead of the default jump jets because of their vertical thrust. So if 6 months from now you're watching this video and Icarus jump jets are back, assume I switch to them unless an annotation on the screen or the description box says otherwise. Know this. The skies are the hunting ground of the Light Assault. All aircraft fear the Light Assault, and the Light Assault is at the top of the food chain. Remember this, because it'll be important later. Let's start with Liberator bombers. These will likely be the most common targets you'll need to destroy, not only because they're dangerous to ground troops, but also because they're very common, as Liberators are used by all 3 factions, and are much easier to crew than a Galaxy. C4 placement is critical. If you land on the tail, it's best to run up to the front of the bomber to place C4 near the pilot. This is very important, because your C4 will deal damage to a Liberator based on where it's placed. I'll demonstrate on screen. 1 C4 brick on the front of the bomber destroys it, but 2 C4 bricks on the tail fins fail to reduce it to a burning state. The rule of thumb for the Liberator is, the closer the C4 is to the pilot, the more damage it will do. Damage seems to be calculated based on how much of the bomber's mass is within blast radius of the C4 brick, so planting it on the front where it would hit the largest portion of the bomber, as well as one of the wings, will generally kill it. Now with that said, you won't always get to pick where you're planting your C4 or landing on the bomber. If the Liberator is moving or attempting to fly away, it's better to spend a second C4 brick on the back to secure a kill, than to fall off and let them escape. Most Liberators will have taken at least a small amount of damage from flak, so if you have 2, it may be better to take that precaution depending on the circumstances. Liberators are most vulnerable when moving slowly to allow their gunners to bombard an area, and if you land on one that's moving too quickly, you might glitch through and fall, or glitch out and die. So avoid trying to jump on fast-moving aircraft. You can still kill fast-moving aircraft by dropping C4 on it as it flies by, but physical contact will likely be an instant death. When attacking low-flying Liberators from the ground, it's important to approach the Liberator from an angle the pilot won't see you from. If you run up in the pilot's line of sight, the bomber will usually fly away. However, this can have its uses. I've noticed that once I'm close to a Liberator and within the pilot's line of sight, they often panic and will sometimes crash into a wall or a tower. This can be used to trick an opponent into crashing or leaving the area if you have no C4. But if you intend to get your points, remember to approach from the side, from a building above, or from below. Also remember that the pilot's viewport is the highest on the 2 in front of the Liberator, and you can sometimes attack from in front if you're outside the pilot's field of view. The FOV can vary a bit from what's demonstrated on screen, but generally speaking, it's fairly narrow, and if you're coming at it more from the side than from directly in front, you probably can't be seen unless he's in third person. If he is in third person, sometimes you also cannot be seen, if attacking from in front or below if your character is visually blocked by the bomber. Closer to the wings, the bomber may have doubling over blind spots. If you have the opportunity to pick where on the bomber you're landing, I recommend the front. Not only because of blind spot use, but this will wedge you between the front of the Liberator and one of the wings. If a pilot sees you, he will often accelerate to try and escape, and this spot will allow you to stick onto his aircraft for another second or two to help you secure the kill. When attacking a Liberator from above, it's best to aim to get as close to the front on top of the pilot as possible. High-altitude Liberators, which are probably your target if you're spending a fighter to bail out and C4 them, are generally less dangerous and less of a priority than lower-altitude Liberators, because they're so far away that infantry and vehicles can dodge their attacks and their bombardments are less accurate. However, Liberator pilots willing to trade some effectiveness for some safety will often be in third person, and may be ready to roll and drop you if you land on top of them. So the best thing to do is try to get directly over the pilot so you can drop a C4 brick onto a kill zone before entering into the pilot's third-person field of view. Or, if you're not that good at chucking C4 yet, land there to give him less time to react to you. Anyway, moving on to fighters. Myth. Fighters are small and move fast. No way light assaults can kill them. Fact. Fighters are higher on the food chain than bombers, but can be killed. They just require more precision than bombers because of their size, speed, and reduced time they spend in a slowed state. Don't sell yourself short. Being overly timid and underconfident in your class is just as bad as being overconfident. Lack of confidence is not the path to enlightenment. Balance in all things. Fighters will generally need to slow down to do an attack run on a ground target, at least if they expect to actually kill something other than an infantryman and gain some significant points. This places them in a short period of vulnerability when they're lining up for their attack run. This can usually be noticed and predicted by a sudden slow in the speed of the fighter. Fighters will also sometimes attempt to provide air cover for ground forces, usually requiring them to move slowly while covering them, leaving them exposed. Vonu scythes are the easiest fighter to land on, mainly because they are the widest with the largest valid landing space. However, not only that, but the field of view of a scythe pilot is more disadvantaging than the other two factions. I've not found a field of view or a scythe video on YouTube that displayed the pilot as being able to fully view the wings that extend in front of the cockpit. This basically allows you some space to land in front of the pilot without being noticed, and one C4 brick should seal the deal. TR Mosquitoes are the middle ground aircraft, easier to land on than Reavers, but harder than scythes. Reavers are the hardest to land on, mainly because they aren't wide enough to land on like scythes, and the tail and the back is too thin to land on while moving, being significantly more thin than a mosquito. It is still possible, but you're more likely to need to drop C4 on a Reaver while hovering over it than reliably landing on top of it. Needless to say, it's best not to approach any of these three from directly in front, unless the fighter is in a rather confined area and risks crashing if he makes sudden movements. All three fighters can take damage from small arms fire. However, I'd like to note the grenade launcher will also do significant damage to fighters, and a hit combined with some carbine fire, while not capable of killing a full health fighter, can keep one from escaping the light assault's feast. Speaking of the feast of points, let's move on to galaxies. Galaxies, the other white meat.
Here we observe a galaxy in its natural environment. This one appears to be wounded and is looking for a safe place to land and repair. But the light assault smells the blood of a wounded animal and closes in for the kill. The galaxy spots the light assault and attempts to flee, but it is too late. The light assault is the predator of the skies, and the galaxy meets a grisly fate for the light assault's feast of points.
Galaxies are the only aircraft you can't kill directly with 2 C4. If you attack a galaxy, you will almost certainly be on top of it and planting your C4 on its back. I recommend trying to center your C4 rather than placing them on the wings, as C4 on the wings will do significantly less damage. 2 C4 bricks on the back of a galaxy will take off a little over half of a galaxy's HP, so it can be used to slay galaxies that are damaged. However, I'm going to show you a little trick. C4 seems to damage galaxies based on how many different sides around it are hit by the blast, and if you plant 2 C4 here in this little nook near the pilot, your 2 C4 will chop off about 3/4 of a galaxy's health. Now this won't always be a valid tactic, since if the galaxy is moving you may only be able to plant C4 on its back. But if you can find a pilot who's hovering, and the galaxy is damaged enough, consider placing your C4 with more care. The rule of thumb for galaxies is, the less open space C4 has around it, the more damage it does. Oh, if only light assaults could carry 3 C4 bricks. Another option for bringing down galaxies is to combine slamming a Liberator into one, followed by the use of a couple C4 bricks. This is not the most efficient way, as it costs infantry resources, as well as aircraft resources, and Liberators can sometimes deal varying amounts of damage. It may be more cost-effective simply to crash another galaxy into it, but the option is there. When hunting galaxies, it's most important to note when targets are valid or not. There isn't much point in planting 2 C4 on top of a full health galaxy if you know you won't kill it. But, is the galaxy hanging out in the area? Can you bring a Liberator or a galaxy of your own? Anyway, thanks for watching my video on light assault anti-aircraft tactics, and good hunting. See four of their Liberators, see them exploding before you, and hear the lamentations of their pilots. I'll see you next time.